It was surreal to walk into a place like this, covered with florals, organza, and pleats. Overflowed with the glitter and the glamour, you eyed an assortment of textures, fabrics, and all manner of cursive typography that could make your head spin. In fact, this wasn't exactly what you had thought when Katsuki Bakugou made plans to organize.
"This is weird,"
you commented while eyeing the store.
"You were suggested this place?"
Don't get any ideas. Ashido was pushy about it,
explained Bakugou with a sneer. You chortled a little before you cleared your throat, still with a wide smile on your face. The unannounced wedding was the talk of the city after a few of your engagement photos were printed in a magazine, courtesy of the photographer who shot more than her fair share of the both of you. You couldn't take a step out on patrol without being followed by paparazzi or journalists nowadays, always watching behind your back. So, had any more thoughts about dates? Venues? Canapes? The kind of catering service you want? You started while your eyes glazed over everything in the store, almost mesmerized by it.
"You know, whatever catering your reunion used was pretty good, but I guess you'd prefer to have them less than clumsy."
Let's just get this over with,
mumbled Bakugou.
I already set a date. It's just choose what you want to fill it with.
"Katsuki, Rome wasn't built in a day."
Yeah, but they laid bricks every hour, so choose what you want and we can make a decision on the schedule while we're at it.
"Katsuki Bakugou, you don't let up, do you?"
I'd be less of a man if I did.
You smiled at his brash comment, deciphering it as mere conjecture on his part. He bragged about his achievements, but never about his humility, hidden away in his mannerisms or his speech. Traversing the store was almost like a maze, despite its colorful way of organizing sections. There were just so many things your eyes soaked in.
"If you set a date, do we have a venue?"
You asked while you perused through a few shelves.
"So we know how to fill it?"
A flap of a brochure flicked near your ear, finding it on your shoulder while Bakugou held it out, walking past you while he glanced every now and then at the items in the store. You quickly snatched the brochure from his hand, spotting the font that emblazoned across its page, the name catching you by surprise.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh my god, Katsuki!
You uttered while your eyes scanned the pages quickly.
What?
He retorted.
Tokyo Sky Egg? In spring?
Thought you'd like the view.
How?
You peered up from the brochure, meeting with a slightly annoyed Katsuki Bakugou whose jeer curled the bridge of his nose.
Never mind.
You uttered nervously, and in part surrendering to his choice of venue.
You deserve the best, and nothing less. Besides, what's wrong with me getting the best?
He questioned haughtily, his legs taking him through the store without a second glance at its wares. You giggled under your breath, aware of his trepidation when it came to status and such. He has mellowed a little over the years, growing a little humbler about his career and his way of life, but it never stopped him from showering you with the necessities. You started to wonder how anyone would be able to stand shopping for their wedding. It crossed your mind why Bakugou hadn't thought of hiring a wedding planner, but with his mind already set on a date and the venue, you figured that his own way of getting things done outweighed receiving help from a stranger, if anything. Bakugou had responded with some grumbling on some of your questions, soon easing into the fact that whatever fashionable taste you were drawn toward became the focus for the day. He merely became the pack horse, lack of a better word, while you eyed the fabrics and the wares.
"Hey Katsuki, how do you feel about silk?"
You asked, mindlessly walking around a few fabrics that drape on display.
"It'll look better than organza, I think." No!
In your mindless wander, your body bumped into someone else. Somebody who was built by how solid their body was in the accidental bump. You turned to find very familiar emerald eyes with his arms carrying a basket already filled with a few samples in the store. It was a momentary lapse of judgment until...
Ah!
The both of you exclaimed in surprise, staring at each other's presence.
Midoriya? What are you doing here?
You asked, shocked to find him.
Shopping?
He replied, lifting the basket in hand with a wry smile.
Uraka suggested this place.
Huh.
You sighed at the thought, wondering if nothing escaped the gossip within pro heroes nowadays. Still, to find Midoriya shopping at this particular store at the same time as yourself and Bakugou was eerily coincidental.
So, is Kachan around?
Asked Midoriya, his eyes scanning around the store.
Yeah, but I guess I'm deciding on the theme.
You replied, revealing a few items in your basket as proof of such a statement.
Are you alone?
No, I'm here with Cutie. They're taking charge of this one, with my input.
Oh, yeah, of course. Any luck?
A little. We're planning the date, so...
Oh, when is it?
You interrupted with glee, only realizing the sudden surprise in Midoriya's eyes at your elation.
Sorry if it's a secret or anything.
Oh, not at all.
Started Midoriya.
It'll be sometime in spring. You can't do that.
Roared a voice from behind, causing your shoulders to stiffen from the abrupt interruption in your conversation.
Kachan?
Called out Midoriya, eyeing Bakugou on the approach. That presence was almost at boiling point. You turned to find your fiancé stomping towards the both of you with that scowl deepening along his forehead and the bridge of his nose. The aura that radiated from him was immense, as if his rage oozed out in a fiery plume.
What do you mean, spring?
He asked with a growl in his tone, his red eyes staring menacingly into Midoriya.
Well, after some discussion, Cutie and I decided that the cherry blossom season would be the best time.
Calmly explained Midoriya, watching the anger in Bakugou's face deepen.
They're already looking into venues. We've already made plans in spring, so you better move yours. You're planning spring as well? When? Doesn't matter. Yes, it does. I proposed first. What does that have to do with anything?
Guys!
You shouted, interrupting the heated argument and earning an angry glare from the both of them.
Izuku?
Called out a voice from the other side of the store, perking Midoriya's ear. You watched the anger almost melt away from his face before he bade farewell to both Bakugou and yourself.
I gotta go.
He muttered before he left with a half-hearted wave, disappearing behind a shelf of cutlery and the myriad maze of this store. Left in silence, you turned to Bakugou, also noticing that fiery rage disappear but left with this sulking pout on his lips.
What was that about?
You asked, confused with Bakugou's reaction to an innocent conversation.
Damn nerd. First he proposed at the same time, and now he's having his wedding at the same time as ours?
Spitefully retorted Bakugou with that anger returning in the tone of his voice.
Actually, he proposed a couple of months after.
Same difference.
You sighed deeply at Bakugou's sense of reason, seeing how childish he acted about this wedding. You had thought that you would fret the most, but seeing Midoriya and the rearing head of Bakugou's competitive nature against the number one wouldn't have come as a shock. For years they had been competitive. More so Bakugou than Midoriya. You figured it was always because of his need to prove something, whether it was to the world or perhaps to you. You still loved how competitive Bakugou was, but it was starting to become more of a nuisance now after realizing you've put this competitive idea in his head in the first place. The day was eventful, at least in bite-sized portions, with Bakugou always eyeing Midoriya from across the store. Wherever Midoriya walked with his fiancée, Bakugou would consciously move someplace else to avoid him, dragging you along. It grew to become problematic when he eyed what he was possibly purchasing and planning. soon becoming commenting every now and then to one-up your wedding against theirs, even going so far to yell across the store to make his comment directly to Midoriya.
Katsuki, how about some crystal for wine glasses?
You asked, turning to him for an answer.
Nah.
He only grunted, his scrutinizing eyes still on Midoriya some distance away.
And we go with strong dark colors for accents?
You continued, receiving another grunt.
Nah.
Would you like a doily per guest at the reception?
You sarcastically asked.
Hmm.
Again, that affirmed grunt uttered from his lips. You stopped with your basket in hand, facing Bakugou, who still walked until he noticed you standing before him, eyes peering up at him.
You've been on edge all day. Isn't this supposed to be a little relaxing?
You asked with a questioning smirk.
What do you mean?
He asked, oblivious.
You've basically said yes to most of my choices without a thought.
So?
Don't you want something for this wedding?
You asked, your emphasis on the fact that the wedding was and is a shared experience.
You've been eyeing Midoriya and his fiancée from across the store this whole time.
No, I haven't.
Denied Bakugou, his eyes staring back into yours angrily.
You literally said yes to doilies a moment ago.
Bakugou exasperatedly uttered with a questionable gasp to hear that he agreed to doilies, finding it ridiculous before his mind caught up to him. He had been absent-minded ever since he bumped into Midoriya. Well, since he crashed into the conversation between him and you, but his pride drove him since. He turned to you, now genuine, but frustrated.
Why the hell is he planning in spring?
He questioned angrily.
I thought long and hard about getting the perfect place and time for this, and he's going to ruin it.
Really?
You piped, questioning his intent.
Before the doilies, I thought you were having a mini contest with him in your head. Except for those loud remarks you carried across the store.
Bakugou only pouted while he glanced into your teasing smile. Secondhand embarrassment was very unbecoming of him, feeling nothing but love for you despite the situation. He soon grabbed hold of your cheeks, pinching them to halt your smirk from making him feel embarrassed and only receiving laughter instead.
Ow, Katsuki, stop!
You resisted while you tried to grab a hold of his wrists.
I expect that kind of smile only at our ceremony, got it?
He barked.
Okay, ow. I'll make sure to bring it along.
Your laughter broke through the words every now and then while Bakugou's fingers laid on your cheeks, feeling his large hands engulf you.
Have you thought about having that conversation with him first before you go about spitting fire in his face again?
You asked warmly while you held onto his hands.
Not that you can.
Bakugou stared incredulously at your remark, aware of his recent behavior, but also disbelieving your assumption of his ability to cause irreparable damage. That look in his eye did not go unnoticed by you, sighing in hindsight.
Let me rephrase.
You corrected.
Before you blast him?
A distant cacophony of laughter caught both of your ears, turning to find Midoriya and his fiancée opposite the aisle where the both of you stood. Their voices were low whispers, but every now and then a chuckle escaped from their vicinity. You watched Bakugou's eyes focused on their presence, staring at their interactions and being not so discreet about it. Still, that look in his eye spoke volumes of a different breed, you thought, while you watched Bakugou's reactions. It was no longer fueled by anger as he was for most of the day. It held something different.
This is why you're best friends,
you reiterated, your eye on Bakugou before he turned back onto you.
even though you try to dismiss that fact.
Bakugou only pouted once more, his hands lowering from your cheeks and now being held by yours between the both of you, fingers trailing in his palms with reassurance.
Right.
He mumbled, his eyes looking elsewhere but yours. You smiled before you continued the trek through the store, pulling him in tow before making another comment about the doilies to his dismay and irritation. The sound of your voice did not go unnoticed, being watched by a green-haired friend in the opposite aisle, his eyes following the back of Bakugou's head. It was a fair few hours in the store while you pointed out the kind of materials agreed upon to plan for the wedding. You thought it best to keep notes on certain items while picking up smaller sets and samples to purchase for now, before solidifying the final decision. Bakugou had no qualms in your decision-making and management of the wedding, as long as you were satisfied with everything. That was what mattered to him. You questioned that logic of his a couple of times, given his passive-aggressive behavior with Midoriya. But now at the checkout, you began to purchase a small cart of items to peruse and decide upon. Bakugou stood by the cashier ready to leave the store, despite his comfort level surrounded by its wares, until a familiar yet cross face approached him.
Kachan, we need to talk,
demanded Midoriya calmly. Bakugou glared at the green-haired man before glancing towards you halfway through purchasing your items.
Go ahead. I can take care of this,
you reassured with a knowing smile. With a huff, Bakugou walked away, secluding himself and Midoriya from earshot. Both men stood before each other, Bakugou aloof about this conversation, while Midoriya stared at him with dismay.
This whole day you've been breathing down my neck,
started Midoriya, scrutinizing Bakugou's behavior.
Seriously, Kachan, what the hell?
Bakugou glared into Midoriya's eyes, unable to deny his childish behavior all day, but refusing to show even the slightest sense of embarrassment to the man. He knew his pride got in the way, but it felt logical for him that his wedding took precedence over Midoriya's. However, after that short talk with you had proven a point earlier for him to speak with Midoriya before jumping to any more wild accusations. He loved you for it.
We can't have the same kind of wedding on the same day,
refrained Bakugou, now listening to how absurd his sense of self felt about the day.
Wait, that's it?
Piped Midoriya in confusion.
Because I'm organizing mine at the same time? That's why you've been aggravated? More than usual?
Bakugou didn't say a word to warrant a response to Midoriya's questions, which in turn only gave Midoriya the answers he needed. He understood Bakugou's cues a little, at least enough to know when to back off. But it felt a little left field to interrupt the day between him and his fiancée shopping for their special day.
I'm sure Cutie can organize it differently if that was a problem,
reassured Midoriya before noticing Bakugou leaning against the wall behind him, arms crossed while he stared back, fueled by his arrogance.
Just talk to me about it.
Bakugou fell silent, embarrassed by the ordeal and how he approached his emotions and the situation. Over the years, he and Midoriya had butted heads many times, realizing the stubbornness in Midoriya that reflected his own. He held mutual respect for him, now more than ever, knowing his desires for the number one spot diminished over the years. Still with arms crossed, he stood tall, staring into Midoriya's eyes with purpose.
1. I proposed first, so my wedding should happen before yours.
He started with a gruff undertone, matter-of-factly speaking.
Then 2, well,
His voice trailed a little while he recalled your little advice, clearing his throat for the next words he was about to speak.
I've been meaning to organize it sooner. But I want you to be my best man. If we had our weddings at the same time, that would be impossible, and you'd ruin mine all because you damn well plan to have yours during the same season.
Bakugou turned away immediately, refusing to look Midoriya in the eye after his request. He decided to leave it at that, waiting for a response from his childhood friend, only to hear nothing. He imagined he surprised him, probably confused him a little, or maybe stoked the fire he ignited when he began to instigate against Midoriya's choice of season. However, he turned his eye back onto Midoriya, seeing eyes glazed over, processing his thoughts.
Well, spit it out,
threatened Bakugou, only earning a genuine smile from Midoriya that slowly beamed with joy.
I'd be honored, Ka-chan.
He piped happily, his goofy grin brimming ear to ear.
Yeah, whatever, nerd. But I would have thought you'd choose Kirishima over me. Kirishima's still in the bridal party. But Lightweight and I talked about it.
Midoriya smiled cordially at Bakugou's admittance, despite it being vague and aloof. Kirishima and he had always been close friends since high school and would often hang out with one another despite it being on Kirishima's terms more than Bakugou's. Still, he felt a swell of happiness knowing now how Bakugou valued their friendship, competitive or not.
I'll talk with Cutie about changing things up. They're pretty good to reschedule ours anyway,
reassured Midoriya in passing.
We haven't locked in anything yet. What?
Asked Bakugou dryly.
We were just talking about it while we were here,
admitted Midoriya.
You didn't have it planned this whole time?
All Bakugou was met with was a nervous chuckle. It only seethed in him while he growled in frustration at the man.
Would it help that I want to return the favor and ask you to be my best man, Ka-chan?
Asked Midoriya, a little unnerved by Bakugou's irritation and disarming it almost immediately after his question. Bakugou calmed a little, honored by the question posed and putting an end to his frustration. He smiled, genuine in this strange feeling of acceptance. Sometimes Midoriya just irritated him for the better.
Sure thing, Izuku.
He agreed with his hand open out to Midoriya. With a hearty handshake, both men formed a truce, aligning with each other just as they always had. It was a strange occurrence, but Bakugou couldn't deny the friendship he still held with Midoriya for all of these years. In his handshake, he gripped onto Midoriya's tightly, smirking at the man before him, now with a challenging glare.
But this doesn't mean that I'm going to go easy on you,
he warned.
My wedding is going to be the talk of the town. Who said anything about pulling a media stunt?
Questioned Midoriya, also with a playful smirk.
I wouldn't need any when mine is due.
Whatever that truce was had solidified, but was only replaced with a bit of harmless rivalry. You stood by the front doors of the store with all of your purchases, waiting by Bakugou's car to unload them. It hadn't been long, but seeing how Bakugou had left to have a solid talk with Midoriya, you could forgive him for having more time. Although you had thought that maybe Bakugou's anger probably got the better of him as well. The conversation, whatever it may be, could have gone both ways. You sighed while you glanced mindlessly around the parking lot, wondering on the themes of the wedding, before a familiar figure stomped towards you, his red eyes directly on you.
So did you end up pitting against each other for the right to matrimony first?
You asked, part curious and part anticipatory of Bakugou's answer before he reached out to hold you in a kiss. It consumed you while he drove his lips into yours, melting into his embrace and the overwhelming wave of passion he exuded. You weren't against his love, but this was out of the blue until he gently pulled away, pressing you against his car, barred by his arms that leaned against its frame and engulfed you within his embrace.
Whoa, Katsuki?
You asked, still held in his arms, while he smirked at the sight of you, flushed and caught by surprise.
I'm going to make you the happiest you've ever been. Every day.
He sultry announced to only your ear, his breath lingering close to your skin. The beep of his car broke the moment, finding that Bakugou unlocked it to help load the purchases from the store. As soon as he did, he spotted Midoriya across the way, his eyes meeting with the man and sharing that accord with one another.
I need to get you competitive more often,
you thought to yourself aloud, smiling up at Bakugou before he returned his attention onto you with that playful smirk of his.